10 feet of pure intimidation, his exoskeleton the color of burnished bronze, reflecting the harsh lighting of Frontier Station Epsilon like a threat made manifest. General Thorak Bloodclaw, Supreme Commander of the Kryll Dominion's Third Fleet, stood in the station's command center with his 4 arms crossed, each massive limb capable of crushing steel. His voice, when it emerged from the vocal slits along his neck, carried the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. "Where is my son?" The words were not a question. They were a demand backed by warships in orbit, by soldiers on standby, by the implicit threat that this diplomatic outpost could become a battlefield in moments if the answer did not satisfy. Captain Sarah Martinez, station commander, stood her ground despite every survival instinct screaming at her to run. She was small by any standard, 5'4" in her boots with graying hair pulled back in a regulation bun. But 25 years in deep space had taught her that size meant nothing when conviction was involved. "General Thorak," she said, her voice steady and professional, "we have been searching since the moment you reported Prince Raxik missing. Every section of the station has been swept. My people would never harm a child, regardless of species or status." The general's mandibles, razor-sharp plates that framed his mouth, clicked together in a sound that made everyone in the room flinch. "My son is not a child. He is 13 cycles old, trained in combat since he could walk, enhanced with the finest military augmentations our science can provide. He does not simply vanish." Behind him, his honor guard shifted. Each one was 8 feet of weaponized biology, their carapaces bearing the scars of battles fought across a dozen star systems. They watched the humans with compound eyes that missed nothing, hands resting on plasma weapons that could reduce flesh to ash in milliseconds. Lieutenant Commander James Park, Martinez's second-in-command, stepped forward. He was young for his rank, barely 30, with the kind of optimistic energy that somehow survived years of dealing with galactic bureaucracy. "General, if I may suggest, perhaps we should expand the search to include the engineering sections. They're maze-like down there, easy for someone unfamiliar with the layout to get turned around." Thorak's head swiveled toward Park with predatory precision. "You believe the heir to the Kryll Dominion got lost, like some common spacer who cannot read a map?" "Not lost, sir," Park replied carefully. "Maybe exploring. Young people, regardless of species, tend to be curious about new places, especially places they're told to stay away from." Something in Park's tone, the way he spoke of the missing prince not as a political asset or a military concern, but as a young person with agency and curiosity, made the general pause. He had expected humans to grovel, to make excuses, to deflect blame. Instead, they spoke of his son with an "uh-oh." Understanding that surprised him. The search intensified. Teams swept through every corridor, every storage bay, every maintenance tunnel. Hours crawled past. The general stood like a statue in the command center, refusing food, refusing rest, his compound eyes fixed on the search grid as if he could force his son's location to appear through sheer willpower. Martinez watched him with growing concern. She had dealt with angry aliens before, with species who threatened war over minor diplomatic incidents. But this was different. Beneath the general's fury, she recognized something more human than she expected, a parent's terror. "General," she said quietly, approaching him when the others had stepped away to coordinate search teams. "When did you last see him?" Thorak did not look at her. "This morning. He was, we argued. He said I treated him like a soldier instead of a son. I told him that in our culture there is no difference. A Kryll must be strong, must be a warrior, or they are nothing." His voice, usually so commanding, held an edge of something that might have been regret. "He ran. I assumed he would return when his anger cooled. That is what warriors do. They master their emotions." "He's 13, Martinez said gently. "Human or Kryll, 13-year-olds don't always master their emotions. Sometimes they just need space to feel them." The general's mandibles clicked softly. "Is this human wisdom?" "It's parent wisdom. I have a daughter about his age. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't forcing them to be strong. It's letting them be vulnerable." Before the general could respond, a call came through on Martinez's comm. It was Chief Engineer Rachel Foster, and her voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement mixed with disbelief. Captain, you need to come to Engineering Bay 7 and bring the general. Did you find him? Martinez asked urgently. Yeah, Foster replied, but you're going to want to see this yourself. The walk to Engineering Bay 7 felt endless. The general moved with military precision, each step measured and controlled. But Martinez noticed the way his hands clenched and unclenched, the way his breathing had accelerated. The honor guard followed at a distance, weapons ready but uncertain. Engineering Bay 7 was the station's unofficial workshop, where off-duty engineers tinkered with personal projects and experimented with new designs. It was always cluttered, always noisy, always smelling of solar and machine oil. But as they approached, Martinez heard something she had never associated with that space before. Laughter. Not human laughter. Something higher, more melodic, with a chittering quality that was distinctly Kryll. The door stood open. Inside, Chief Foster stood with her arms crossed, leaning against a workbench, watching with an expression of bemused wonder. And there, in the center of the workshop floor, was a sight that made the general freeze mid-step. Prince Raxik, heir to the Kryll Dominion, sat cross-legged on the floor next to a human man in grease-stained coveralls. The prince's bronze exoskeleton was smudged with what looked like carbon scoring. His 4 arms were animated, gesturing excitedly as he examined a dismantled piece of machinery. And he was laughing. The human beside him was Marcus Webb, the station's senior propulsion engineer. He was in his 50s, built like a barrel with massive forearms from decades of manual labor, his dark skin showing burn scars from 100 minor accidents. He was explaining something about plasma flow regulators, using his hands to demonstrate, and the prince was listening with rapt attention. So if you route the coolant through this secondary channel, Marcus was saying, his voice patient and educational, you get better heat dissipation, which means you can push the plasma throughput higher without risking a cascade failure. See? But would that not create a pressure differential that could rupture the containment field? Raxik asked, his youthful voice eager and interested. Good catch, Marcus grinned. That's exactly what would happen if you didn't compensate with a variable field modulator right here. You've got an eye for engineering, kid. The prince's chittering laugh filled the workshop again. My father says engineering is for support caste, not warriors. But this is amazing. On our ships, I never get to see how anything actually works. They just tell me to trust the systems. Marcus snorted. Trust the systems? That's how people die in space, kid. You always need to know how your ship works, how to fix it when it breaks, how to jury-rig something when you're out of parts and supplies. That's not support work. That's survival. Father, the prince had finally noticed the general standing in the doorway. His compound eyes widened, and his posture shifted immediately from relaxed curiosity to military readiness. He started to stand, to assume a formal stance, but Marcus placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Easy there, Rax, Marcus said quietly. You haven't done anything wrong. General Thorak stood frozen, his 4 arms hanging at his sides, his mandibles parted in what might have been shock. His son, the heir he had trained in combat since birth, the warrior he had molded through discipline and expectation, sat on a workshop floor covered in grease, looking more alive and engaged than the general had seen in years. The general started, then stopped. His vocal slits vibrated with uncertainty. I was searching for you. I know, Raxik said, his voice small. I heard the announcements. I did not want to be found yet. Why? The word emerged as almost a plea. Raxik looked down at the machinery in his hands. Because when I am with you, I have to be the prince, the warrior, the heir. I have to be perfect and strong, and never show weakness. But here with Marcus, I can just be me. I can ask questions without being told that warriors already know everything. I can make mistakes without being punished. I can learn things just because they are interesting, not because they serve military purposes. The workshop had gone completely silent. Even Chief Foster, who usually had a comment for everything, stood quietly watching. The honor guards remained at the door, uncertain how to process what they were witnessing. Marcus cleared his throat. General, sir, before you get mad at the kid, you should know this was partly my fault. I found him in the maintenance tunnels about 6 hours ago. He was trying to trace the power conduits because he wanted to understand how the station's energy distribution worked. He triggered a sensor, and I went to check it out. And you did not report finding him immediately? The general's voice carried an edge of danger. No, sir, I didn't. Because when I found him, he was crying. The honor guards made sounds of disbelief. Kryll warriors did not cry. It was biologically possible, but culturally unthinkable. Tears were weakness, and weakness was death in Kryll society. That is impossible, the general said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's not impossible. It's just not talked about. Marcus stood, facing the general without fear. He was scared and overwhelmed and tired of pretending to be something he's not ready to be. So I did what any decent person would do. I took him to my workshop, gave him some food, and let him tinker with some electronics while he calmed down. You fed him? The general's tone was unreadable. Marcus gestured to a workbench where empty containers sat. Chocolate milk and protein bars, universal teenager food, apparently. He was hungry. When's the last time he actually ate, not just consumed ration packs because it was scheduled? The general had no answer. I taught him how to solder, Marcus continued, his voice gaining confidence. Showed him how to read a circuit diagram, explained the basics of plasma containment theory. And you know what? He's brilliant. Natural engineer's mind. Sees problems from angles I wouldn't have thought of. You've been so busy training him to be a warrior that you never noticed he might have other talents. The Kryll do not need engineers, the general said, but the words sounded hollow. We have support castes for that. Every species needs engineers, General. You can have the best warriors in the galaxy, but if your ships break down, you're just armed passengers in a metal coffin. Marcus looked down at Raxik. Besides, being good at one thing doesn't mean you can't be good at other things too. Who says a prince can't be both a warrior and an engineer? Raxik looked up at his father with compound eyes that somehow conveyed hope and fear in equal measure. Father, I do not want to disappoint you. I will train, I will fight, I will be the heir you need me to be. But could I also learn other things, things that interest me? The general stood silent for a long moment. Martinez watched his face, or what passed for a face in Kryll physiology, and saw emotions warring beneath the armored surface. Pride, confusion, anger, and something else, something that looked like realization. When I was young, the general said slowly, I wanted to be a navigator. I loved the stars, loved plotting courses through impossible routes, finding paths where others saw only obstacles. My father told me that navigators were for the support caste, warriors led. They did not calculate trajectories, so I became a warrior, as I was expected to be. He moved forward, his massive form somehow seeming less intimidating as he approached his son. I became a good warrior, an exceptional one. I have won battles, conquered systems, brought glory to our dominion. But I have never loved it the way I loved studying star charts when I was young. Raxik stared up at his father in amazement. You wanted to be a navigator? I wanted many things. I gave them up because I thought that was what strength meant, sacrificing what you want for what you are supposed to be. The general's mandibles clicked softly. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps true strength is being able to be yourself while also fulfilling your duties. Marcus stepped back, giving them space. Martinez noticed he was smiling slightly, the expression of someone who had facilitated something important without really planning to. Father, Raxik said quietly, I do not want to run away from being a prince. I just want to be allowed to be more than only a prince. The general lowered himself to his knees, bringing his massive head level with his son's. It was a posture of vulnerability that no Kryll warrior would normally assume, especially not in front of aliens. I have been trying to make you into the warrior I became, not the warrior you need to be, the general said. That was my failure, not yours. If you wish to study engineering, then you will study engineering. If you wish to learn navigation, or medicine, or any other discipline, you may do so. The Kryll Dominion will be stronger for having a leader who understands all aspects of our civilization, not just warfare. Raxik's chittering laugh returned, this time mixed with something that sounded like a sob. He threw his 4 arms around his father's neck in an embrace that would have been forbidden under normal Kryll protocol. The general's arms came up slowly, uncertainly, as if he had forgotten how to hold his child. Then they wrapped around Raxik, and the station's residents discreetly looked away to give them privacy in their moment. Captain Martinez approached Marcus, speaking quietly. "That was well done, engineer." Marcus shrugged. "I just treated him like a kid who needed someone to talk to. Turned out he needed that more than anyone realized." "How did you know?" "I've got a son about his age back on Earth. Kids, human or alien, they're all dealing with the same stuff, figuring out who they are, dealing with parents who have expectations, trying to find their place. Sometimes they just need an adult who isn't their parent to tell them it's okay to not have all the answers yet." Chief Foster joined them, her expression thoughtful. "You know, this is going to be a diplomatic incident for the history books. Crisis averted by the power of engineering lessons in chocolate milk." "Better than most diplomatic incidents," Martinez replied. "Those usually end with threats and ultimatums." They watched as the general stood, still holding his son's hand, something that would have been unthinkable hours ago. The honor guards looked uncomfortable witnessing their commanding officer display such emotion, but they made no move to intervene. "Captain Martinez," the general said, his voice carrying its usual command, but with a new undertone of something warmer. "I owe you and your crew a debt. You could have met my fear with force. Instead, you met it with understanding." "No debt necessary, General. We're just glad Raxik is safe. Nevertheless, the Kryll Dominion will remember this. You have shown me that humans possess a wisdom we have overlooked in our assessments." He looked down at his son. "And Engineer Webb has reminded me of truths I'd forgotten about strength and duty." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable with the formal attention. "I just shared my workspace, sir. Any decent person would have done the same." "No," the general said firmly. "Many would have returned him immediately, would have prioritized diplomatic protocol over the needs of a frightened young person. You prioritized his well-being. That required courage and wisdom." Raxik pulled at his father's arm. "Father, could Marcus teach me more about engineering and how things work? I have so many questions." The general's mandibles curved into what might have been a smile. "If Engineer Webb is willing to tolerate an over-curious student, I would be honored to have him serve as your instructor in practical engineering." Marcus looked startled. "Me? Sir, I'm just a propulsion engineer. I'm not qualified to teach royalty." "You are qualified to teach someone who wishes to learn," the general corrected, "and you have already proven you can do what the finest tutors in the Dominion could not. Make my son enthusiastic about education rather than fearful of failure." Marcus looked at Captain Martinez helplessly. Martinez smiled. "If you're willing, engineer, I think the station can spare you for a few hours a week. We could set up an official cultural exchange program. Might do wonders for human-Kryll relations." "Cultural exchange through engineering tutoring," Foster mused. "I love it. Can I sit in on some sessions? I'd be interested to hear Kryll perspectives on plasma dynamics." What began as a diplomatic crisis transformed into something else entirely. Over the following weeks, Marcus's workshop became an unofficial classroom. Prince Raxik visited regularly, accompanied by his honor guard, who gradually relaxed from threat assessment mode to curious observation. The prince proved to be an exceptional student. His Kryll neural structure, designed for rapid tactical assessment, made him extraordinarily good at visualizing complex systems and identifying potential points of failure. Within a month, he was suggesting improvements to station systems that impressed even Foster. But more than the engineering lessons, something else developed. The general began visiting as well, ostensibly to observe his son's progress. But Martinez noticed he would linger, asking Marcus questions about Earth culture, about how humans raised their children, about finding balance between duty and personal fulfillment. On Kryll Prime, the general confided to Marcus one afternoon while Raxik was absorbed in repairing a damaged servo motor. "We believe emotion is weakness. We teach our children to suppress feelings, to focus only on duty and honor. But I watch my son with you, and I see him happy in a way he has never been in military training. It makes me question everything I thought I understood about strength." Marcus wiped grease from his hands, considering his words carefully. "General, I think maybe your people confused being strong with not feeling things. Humans learned a long time ago that emotions aren't weakness, they're information. Fear tells you there's danger. Sadness tells you something mattered to you. Joy tells you you're on the right path. The trick isn't suppressing them, it's understanding them and not letting them control you. This is why humans defeated the Zorgoth swarm when larger empires fell, the general said thoughtfully. Your species fights for each other, not just for territory or resources. You fight with emotional investment. We saw it as primitive. Perhaps we were wrong. Different isn't the same as better or worse, Marcus replied. Your way works for you. Our way works for us. Maybe the smart thing is learning from each other instead of assuming one way is the only way. Raxik looked up from his work. Marcus, is this servo motor supposed to make this noise? The motor was indeed making a noise, a grinding whine that suggested imminent failure. Marcus and the general both moved to investigate, and soon all three were clustered around the workbench, theorizing about what was wrong. Captain Martinez, watching from the doorway with Lieutenant Park, smiled at the sight. You know, I'm writing this up as one of the station's success stories. Diplomatic relations strengthened through intergenerational engineering mentorship. Park grinned. The bureaucrats back home are going to love that. Much better than we almost started a war but chocolate milk saved us. Though that would be a more accurate summary, Martinez conceded. The real test came 6 weeks after the initial incident. The Kryll Dominion was hosting a military demonstration, showing off new warship designs to potential allies. General Thorak invited the station's senior staff to attend, including Marcus. The demonstration was held in orbit around Kryll Prime, and it was impressive. Massive battleships performing maneuvers that defied physics, weapons firing with precision that could cut a target ship in half from 1,000 kilometers away, and fighter craft moving in perfect synchronization. But the highlight was Prince Raxik's presentation. He had been given permission to showcase a redesign of the Kryll fighter's propulsion system. Using what he had learned from Marcus and his own innate understanding of Kryll technology, he had created a hybrid system that improved efficiency by 17% while reducing heat signature by 23%. He presented his work not just to military officers, but to an audience that included engineers, tacticians, and even some representatives from the support castes who normally would never be invited to such events. His voice was confident but not arrogant, excited but not childish. He answered technical questions with precision and acknowledged when he didn't know something. Many of these improvements came from studying human engineering philosophy, Raxik explained to the assembled crowd. Humans build their systems to be repairable by the people using them, not just by specialized technicians. This makes their equipment more reliable in field conditions. I applied this thinking to our fighters, and the results exceeded expectations. Afterward, as the demonstration concluded, Marcus found himself approached by several Kryll engineers, all eager to discuss their work and compare methodologies. What had started as tutoring one student had opened a door to broader technical exchange. General Thorak watched the interactions with what might have been satisfaction. You have changed my son, he told Marcus, and through him you have begun to change our culture. The support castes are being given more respect, more voice in military planning. Engineers are being recognized not as servants, but as crucial components of our strength. All I did was teach a kid how to solder, Marcus protested. You taught my son that curiosity is not weakness, that asking questions is not shameful, that there are many forms of strength beyond physical combat. The general's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. These lessons are now spreading through our military academies. We are producing warriors who think as well as fight. This will make us stronger. And hopefully less likely to solve every problem with violence, Marcus added carefully, the general's compound eyes fixed on him. You are bold to suggest the Kryll are overly violent. I'm suggesting that having more options is always better than having fewer, Marcus replied. Sometimes the best solution is military. Sometimes it's diplomatic. Sometimes it's economic or technical. The more tools you have, the better you can handle whatever situation arises. Wisdom from a grease-covered engineer in a cluttered workshop, the general mused. The universe has a sense of humor. Prince Raxik joined them, his bronze exoskeleton polished for the formal event, but somehow still managing to have a smudge of carbon scoring on one arm. Father, did you see? The Admiralty is requesting I present my propulsion design to the fleet engineers for possible full implementation. I saw, the general said. There was unmistakable pride in his voice. You have brought honor to our house, my son, not through conquest, but through innovation. Could not have done it without Marcus, Raxik said, his chittering laugh bright. He taught me that the best engineers are not afraid to try things that might not work. That failure is just information about what does not work, which is still valuable. A very human philosophy, the general observed. A very good philosophy, Raxik corrected. That evening, at the formal dinner following the demonstration, General Thorak made an announcement that surprised the assembled dignitaries. The Kryll Dominion was establishing an exchange program with human technical institutions. Young Kryll, with aptitude for engineering, would be able to study with human mentors, learning their approaches and philosophies. In exchange, human engineers would be welcome to study Kryll military technology and integration techniques. For too long, we have believed that strength comes only from warriors, the general declared. My son has taught me, with the help of a human engineer, that strength comes from understanding all aspects of your civilization. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. We will no longer treat our technical experts as weak links to be hidden. They will be celebrated as the crucial supports they truly are. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Conservative military officers looked scandalized. Progressive members of the support castes looked hopeful. The diplomatic corps scrambled to understand the implications. But Captain Martinez, watching from her place at the human delegations table, understood exactly what was happening. A culture was evolving in real time, catalyzed by one frightened prince, one patient engineer, and a workshop full of broken machinery and possibility. Later, Marcus found himself on the observation deck of the Kryll flagship, looking out at the planet below. Prince Raxik joined him, moving quietly for someone in an exoskeleton. Thank you, the prince said simply. For what? Teaching you to solder? For seeing me as more than just the heir. For treating me like a person with my own interests and abilities. Raxik's voice was serious beyond his years. For showing my father that there were other ways to measure worth. Marcus put a hand on the young Kryll's shoulder, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months ago. You did the hard part, kid. You were brave enough to admit you wanted something different. A lot of people never do that. They just follow the path laid out for them, even if it makes them miserable. Are you happy, Marcus, with your path? Mostly, yeah. I wanted to be an engineer since I was about your age. Loved taking things apart, figuring out how they worked, making them better. I'm lucky that what I loved turned out to be useful. He paused. But I also learned it's okay to want more than one thing. I'm an engineer, but I'm also a father, a husband, a terrible guitar player, and an okay cook. You don't have to be just one thing. Father is trying, Raxik said quietly. He asked me yesterday about my interests beyond engineering. I told him I was curious about xenobiology. He did not tell me it was inappropriate for a warrior. He asked me what I found interesting about it. That's progress. It is strange. For so long, I thought he disapproved of me, that I was failing him by not being the perfect warrior. But now I think perhaps he was trying to protect me by making me strong, and he just did not realize there were different kinds of strength. Parents mess up sometimes, Marcus said. We try our best, but we're working off our own experiences, our own fears, our own understanding. Sometimes we get it wrong. The important thing is being willing to learn and change. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Back on Frontier Station Epsilon, life returned to normal, or as normal as things ever got on a diplomatic outpost. But there were changes. The station's engineering bays started receiving visits from Kryll officers interested in technical discussions. Human engineers were invited to present at Kryll military academies. Cultural exchange programs expanded beyond just technical cooperation. And in Marcus Webb's workshop, now officially designated as a cultural exchange classroom, students from multiple species gathered to learn not just engineering, but a philosophy of curiosity, of understanding that strength came in many forms, of recognizing that showing vulnerability was not weakness, but the first step toward genuine connection. Chief Foster started teaching a class on advanced propulsion theory that was always overbooked. Lieutenant Park organized a series of lectures on conflict resolution that drew surprising interest from military officers across multiple species. Captain Martinez found herself consulting on how to build educational programs that fostered understanding rather than just tolerance. The incident that had almost sparked a diplomatic crisis, instead, became the foundation for something larger. The Kryll Dominion began reassessing how they trained their young, incorporating more diverse educational approaches. Other species, watching the changes, started questioning their own assumptions about strength, duty, and what they expected from their next generations. General Thorak became an unexpected advocate for educational reform, using his military prestige to push for changes that more diplomatic voices had struggled to achieve. He spoke at conferences about his own experiences, about realizing he had been projecting his own unfulfilled ambitions onto his son, about learning to see his child as an individual rather than as an extension of himself. Prince Raxik continued his studies, both military and technical. He excelled at both, proving that competence in one area did not preclude competence in another. His hybrid approach, combining warrior training with engineering expertise, became a model that other young Kryll began to emulate. But perhaps most importantly, he remained the same curious, enthusiastic student who had hidden in maintenance tunnels because he wanted to understand how things worked. The prince, who had been afraid his interests made him weak, became the heir who showed strength came from embracing all aspects of yourself. Marcus continued his work as senior propulsion engineer, though his role had expanded considerably. He found himself serving as an informal cultural liaison, translating not just between technical terminology, but between different ways of understanding the world. He never sought recognition for what he had done, still insisting he had just shared his workshop with a kid who needed help. But the people who had witnessed what happened understood the truth. In a galaxy full of species jockeying for advantage, competing for resources, viewing each other through lenses of suspicion and ancient prejudice, Marcus had done something revolutionary. He had looked at an alien child and seen just a child who needed kindness. That simple act of compassion had rippled outward in ways no military victory or diplomatic negotiation could match. It had shown that understanding could bridge even the widest gulfs between species. That strength and vulnerability were not opposites, but two sides of the same coin. That the greatest victories sometimes came not from forcing others to change, but from creating spaces where change could happen naturally. Years later, when Prince Raxik became General Raxik, leader of a Kryll military that was both fierce and intellectually diverse, when he presided over an empire that valued both warriors and engineers, both strength and curiosity, he would trace the transformation back to a single afternoon in a cluttered workshop. An afternoon when a human engineer looked at a frightened alien prince and instead of seeing a diplomatic incident, saw a young person who needed someone to tell him it was okay to be interested in things beyond what he was supposed to be. In the end, that was the story that echoed through diplomatic channels, that was taught in academies across multiple species, that became a touchstone for how first contact and cultural exchange should be approached. Not the story of military might or technological superiority or clever negotiation, but the story of how a lost child found safety in an unexpected place, how a parent learned to see their child as they truly were, and how an engineer in grease-stained coveralls showed an empire, that the greatest strength was allowing people to be fully themselves. Sometimes, the most profound victories are won not in battle but in moments of simple human or alien connection. In the willingness to see beyond surfaces and stereotypes, in the courage to admit that the way things have always been done might not be the only way, or even the best way. And sometimes all it takes to change the galaxy is chocolate milk, a soldering iron, and someone willing to teach a curious young mind that questions are not weakness, but the very foundation of strength.